Hello, and welcome back to Ask a Newsworker. In today's video, we're going to address a very big question, and I'm just going to say up front that we're probably not going to get to the whole thing, but I think it's an important question that we'll continue to revisit as the channel moves along, as we do future videos. But the question is this: is the news true? When one is watching the news, when one is consuming the news, can one verifiably say that the information one is receiving is true? It's an understandable question. It's an understandable thought. I think a lot of people think that when they're consuming the news. They go, is this true? Is the news I'm consuming true? Is this true? And how do I really know that? Well, hopefully it's true. If it's a professional, ethical news organization, it will be true. It will be as true as it can possibly be. But unfortunately, it's a little more complicated than that, sorry. And I will explain why through one story from my professional career that happened just a couple of years ago or so. There was a shooting. There was a shooting in a big city, and a person died, at least one person from what I recall. There might have been more. And the initial reports from police was that the person who died was 16. The police said a 16-year-old boy has been killed. And that was the news that went out. And that is certainly more shocking than perhaps a fully grown man in his 20s or 30s being shot. I mean, all shootings are sad and tragic and strange and uncomfortable in many ways, but when it's a 16-year-old, it's especially troubling. So the police said at a news conference that a 16-year-old boy had been killed in this shooting. They weren't really sure what the context was, if it was a gang thing, wasn't really clear what was going on, but they said a 16-year-old is dead. So that's the news. The news went out like that. News outlets covered the police press conference, covered the event, and they said a 16-year-old boy has died in a shooting downtown in this big city that I'll just leave unnamed because I'm just trying to keep this as general as possible. But it was a big city. It was real. It happened. So the news went out that a 16-year-old boy had died. It was out for hours. You know, the pace of the news is faster than ever. It was circulating, getting published, republished, retweeted, commented upon. Wow, that's horrible. I can't believe that happened. I'm so sorry for that child and his family, whatever happened. Something like, I want to say 4 or 5 hours, maybe 6 hours later, like far later. It happened in the afternoon, and then around the evening of the same day, the police quietly issued a statement and said, actually, the person who was shot earlier was 21. It's a 21-year-old, sorry. I don't even know if they said sorry, but they corrected. It went from 16 to 21 over the course of 4, 5, 6 hours. Why did that happen? I have no idea. Why didn't they just say 21 at the start? Why did they think the victim was 16 and not 21? I have no clue. And one other thing I'll mention in future videos is that the police can be very difficult to deal with as a member of the press. They often don't give great information. They often don't give information that people can use. They're usually very quiet. Don't explain their methods very much. So that can be a frustration unto itself. But the purposes of this story, a 16-year-old suddenly turned into a 21-year-old. And it's not clear why. Did they age 5 years under the blanket or whatever? I mean, that's a bit of a dark joke, but what happened? Like, as a member of the press, I was thinking, why did the police make such a huge error? So here's where it plays into the whole question of, is the news true? Someone who read the news report quoting the police earlier in the day saying it was a 16-year-old victim would have had that in their head. And then if they saw the correction or an updated thing saying, oh, actually turns out that the victim is 21, the news reader, the news consumer could very fairly go to the press and say, you lied to me. That wasn't true. You said the victim was 16 and turns out they're 21. Why did you do that? Why did that happen? Well, it happened because the media passes along messages from other people. The media passed along a message from the police in this case. There was a shooting. The police attended the shooting, the aftermath of the shooting, held a press conference, gave the press information, wrong information, it turns out, false information, and the press passed that along. So the press can pass along false information from an institution, even one like the police, if that institution happens to get it wrong. Sometimes they get it wrong just because of negligence or incompetence or who knows, confusion. And sometimes they get it wrong maybe because they want to get it wrong or they want a specific message to be out there, and they know that a lot of people in the press will report it uncritically, distribute it uncritically, and not really reflect too much upon the truth content of the message they're passing along, which is another problem. But at the same time, should people in the press be scrutinizing every single thing the police say at every press conference? I mean, can you imagine a reporter saying, how do we know he's 16? Is he really 16? At the press conference itself, they might be asked to leave. It's like, why are you questioning the age of a person who has just died? I mean, it would be very inappropriate. So we're trusting the cops. The media is trusting the police to say something true, to tell us the truth, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't tell us the truth because they don't know it themselves, because they make mistakes. So the point is the news true? Well, it depends where the news got their truth from, where they got their facts from. The news, once again, is passing along information from other people a lot of the time, if not most of the time. So where did that information come from? And how do we know that's correct? It's hard to say. And again, as I'm saying in the story, sometimes even otherwise reliable, important public institutions like the police will make a mistake. And that mistake will circulate for hours on end. And then when people get the correction, they go, what happened? But they'll get mad at the press. People will get mad at the news for misinforming them when the news was just passing along what the police had told them. But then the police changed their mind for whatever reason, and now the press has to say, sorry, here's the new figure, here's the new number. But the public doesn't necessarily understand that. They get mad at the press and they think the press is lying to me. Well, the press just passed on bad information that they didn't even realize was bad, which is not great either. We certainly should have more mechanisms to prevent that from happening. But is the news true? Depends. Depends where it came from. Depends if the people who are feeding the news, who are holding the press conference, who are providing the news to the news organization, know what they're doing, know what they're talking about. And again, there are situations much more complicated than this, where perhaps a false message wants to be put into the news circulation. There's various people in society. Again, we'll get into this later on. It sounds conspiratorial and stuff, and maybe it is. I don't know. But there's people in society who want to get their message into the press because they know how influential the press is. They know that people read the news. They know that people quote the news to each other. They take it very seriously. They'll alter the course of their lives based on what they read in the news. They'll make different decisions based on what they read in the news. So the news is a very powerful tool. And of course, some people want to get their message, whatever it may be, into the news stream for that reason. Is the news true? Hopefully, sometimes, but mistakes are made. Bad information can be passed on to the press and then echoed throughout the entirety of the media. And that's a problem. How do we fix that? I'm not entirely sure yet, but I want to get into those discussions too as we continue to talk about the news here on Ask a News Worker. Thanks again for watching.